Welcome back, everybody, to day 4. This is the walkthrough of the Virtual Design Sprint template for the Global Virtual Design Sprint. As always, if you have any questions, reach out to me in Slack, send me an email, or look me up on LinkedIn if you have any questions about what I go through today. Let's get started. So this section combines both the walkthrough of the prototype and user interviews. There's a link, it's a box for the prototype, wherever it comes from, Figma or elsewhere, and you probably want to put it there. And your interview materials that you'll be using to talk to people about what you've done with a prototype. These can be moderator guides, user guides, anything that you think would be relevant to your team finding something to work with when they do their interviews or to listen in. It should probably be put in this space. If there are any discrepancies between the prototype and what the user interviews materials are showing, that's probably going to come out in our next step, which is doing a dry run. You'll be combining both the prototype and the user moderator guide and other materials you're going to be using for user interviews. These boxes are basically here to collect any discrepancies or any mistakes you see in either the prototype or the user interviews. And these should be easy to fix. You don't want to change anything wholesale if you discover something at this stage. This is really to kind of tighten things up and make sure when someone kind of views the prototype, they know what they're going to be expecting and what you're going to be saying to them when you're asking them questions. Over here in step 2 is basically a way to prepare and conduct your user interviews. So I have a sample format here where I have an interview number, a name, a LinkedIn profile space, a space for the recording when it gets done, either through Google Drive or otherwise, depending on where you're hosting those links, or here in Mural. A color code if you want to color any of the cards based on the response that they give, whether it's positive, negative, informational, or an insight to yourself. And subsections here that correspond to whatever's in the user guide. And I've included a previous effort in the Global Virtual Design Sprint with the questions that they asked, as well as the categories here. And I'll expand this out a little bit to show all 5 sections. Now, you may choose to do this vertically rather than horizontally. This is just an example of one way of doing it in Mural, because if you had multiple interviews, say 5, you're probably going to move all of this stuff down and just keep on bringing more and more rows to basically record those interviews. So Mural is an option. Other people use Excel, sometimes Google Docs. Whatever you choose to do, make sure you document what your users say and get an impression of what they think of the prototype. After you go through all 5 user interviews, you're going to go into this section, which is evaluating your results and deciding what to do next. In this first question here, where it asks which users had a positive versus a negative reaction to the prototype, assuming you have 5 interviews, you can have them say positive, neutral, or negative, and this is just here for placeholder. So in the end, you may have maybe 3 positives, 1 neutral, 1 negative, 3 negatives, 1 neutral, 1 positive. Whatever it is, based on the overall impression you have of their interview and what they thought of the prototype, you want to put the results here. And then we go over to the right, which long-term goal do you think the prototype successfully addressed? At some point earlier, you just picked one, and I kind of outlined this. So hypothetically, let's say a team picked the 30-day long-term goal as something they were targeting with their particular prototype. So this is going to be something where, okay, out of all these ones, did we pick the right period of time? And do you think we successfully addressed what we were going to do for this particular goal? You will have to go back to day 1 and kind of pull all of these original answers, all the votes you did, but it should only take about a minute or so, and I would definitely put it in here for some insight. Question 3 over here is how would you answer your sprint questions after seeing the results of your prototype? In the past, sprint questions have been kind of treated as yes, no, maybe. I think that's been the wrong approach. What you want to do is the sprint questions, if they were written correctly, were addressing the problem, asking questions about the problem. And after all the work you've done with the prototype and talking to people about your prototype, you should have an idea of how to answer the sprint questions that you see over here on the left. So you're going to give your own opinion, depending on where your avatar is here in the space, on each of these sprint questions. Did your work in the virtual design sprint answer the sprint question in a way that makes sense? And if you want to, you can actually respond to the sprint question in your own words, and everyone can get the perspective of everyone else on the team on how things went with that. Finally, number 4 is, if the work on this challenge continued, where would you go from here? Whatever the case may be, you probably want to put in a couple of responses, 2 or 3 responses here, and let everyone know what your intention is after you get done with this. Was it just to kind of go through the process and what it was all about? If so, just put it there, just for reference. And that should give you a pretty good idea of where the team has landed with their virtual design sprint. Let's get into some retrospection with the second hour of the day. Here, we're going to concentrate on two things. First, what did you learn and what were you proud of? I think that's important to emphasize, especially for people that have gone through this the first time. First, we start off with the glow, which is what were you most proud of doing in the virtual design sprint you did with your team, and what do you want to improve or learn more about? So maybe there's some things that were the start of an understanding of user research or interviewing or an appreciation of what you do already, but now you know where you can basically go with things. These aren't tied to any particular individual, but it's good to know where people are kind of going after the design sprint is done. What are they going to improve or learn more about? What has this experience kind of influenced them to do going forward? So once you kind of go into this spectrum of what you did really well and what you're learning, go over here and let's concentrate on the team. Put in some highlights that you wanted to point out for everyone else, like something that happened during the course of the week that you felt was really good that somebody else had done, something about the work that really came through. You could put your avatars in these circles, but in the center part here, you can either put circles or squares. Go ahead and put your 2 cents around what was your highlight. Let everyone know what happened this week that really stood out for you and share it with the team. And finally, once you're done with this particular one, you have a couple of really simple exercises in these next few steps. So the first one is to ask the team, do you want to present your work in a GVDS showcase? And that's our mechanism here in the event for showcasing what teams do, what kind of work they did, and where they're going from what they've done in the GVDS. So you can do a simple mural vote and figure out where people want to go with things. If you want to and have some time, you can see previous showcases done by different attendees of the Global Virtual Design Sprint as a reference point. So no pressure. You can do it or you don't have to do it. Perfectly fine. Whatever you have time for and whatever your interest is. Just make sure that you do an anonymous mural vote so that, no one points fingers and goes, why aren't you doing this? Well, that doesn't happen, but you know what I mean. Anyway, so after you cast your vote here, you're going to go over to step 3. And what I encourage everyone to do is to nominate a teammate for a GVDS Spotlight Award. If there's somebody on your team that really went above and beyond what normally would be, like a researcher or a designer or advisor or facilitator, this is a great place to kind of do it. And if you double click on this, you'll basically be shown a type form that goes into the Spotlight Awards. And it'll ask you questions. It'll explain what it's all about. It'll ask for the email address. So you want to make sure you put in something that can be recognized. And then it basically goes into who you want to nominate for a Spotlight Award, and usually it's a first name, last name. So I'll put in Teddy Bear because I'm just doing a test. And then you can basically nominate them for any one of these. You can select as many as you like. So if somebody did both X Factor and designing, you can choose anyone you want in here. And then once you do that, you go into in-depth why this person deserves to be in the spotlight and what do they do to stand out. And these answers will basically be recorded and put into an award ceremony that we have called the GVDS Spotlight Awards. I usually keep these anonymous, so no one's going to really know who was the person that submitted them. If you really feel compelled to also give people some kudos, I'd recommend going on LinkedIn and giving them a recommendation based on your work in the GVDS. I'll have some instructions later on how to do that. And that is pretty much it. I'd really like to thank you for being part of the Global Virtual Design Sprint. I hope this was a good learning experience. I hope you made some new friends and new network connections. If there's anything I can improve about the event, I'm going to provide a link to basically give you that chance to give feedback, or you can email me or DM me in Slack directly. Once again, thank you for your time. Thank you for being part of this. Take care, and we'll see you soon.